Today's episode is brought to you by RIMOL Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. RIMOL Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimolgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a RIMOL tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process, so make sure to check them out. Today's episode is also brought to you by Growers & Co. We are proud to be sponsored by Growers & Co. They specialize in making clothing and tools for growers like us, those who love to grow food, to be outside with our hands in the soil. Their functional wear keeps growers comfortable and resists the wears of everyday hard work. They also publish a magazine twice a year that celebrates growers who are changing the world through small-scale farming. You do what it takes to bring home that harvest, big or small, and Growers & Co. is here to support that important work. Visit growers.co or follow their amazing work on Instagram at Growers & Co. All right. Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to the No-Till Market Garden Podcast, Episode 1, Season 4. Got a great episode to kick the season off with. I interviewed Hayden O'Donnell from Goodie Farm in Cherry Valley, California, about the small operation he and his partner Jane run down there, which includes a really interesting farm store setup. So we discuss his markets and managing that farm store. Hayden does not have a background in farming, so we talk about his path into agriculture and the learning curve involved there, the challenges with opening up new land and expanding the farm, and a whole lot more. Such a fun episode, but before we get going, a couple things. I released a book this year called The Living Soil Handbook, which you can buy wherever you buy books. But if you're in the US, I encourage you to purchase it from notillgrowers.com, if at all possible, because when you do that, it helps to support our work. You can also support our work through patreon.com/notillgrowers, where there are some perks, but not the least of which is that at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you get a shout out in the show. So big shout outs this week to Stephanie and Alex from Blue Berwyn Farm, Stephen Smith, Alberto Diaz, Ojai Roots, Scott Harris, Green Man, Veggie Cropper, Earth Care Farmer Jane Murner Cynical, Asia Smith, Scott Snodgrass, Andrew and Haley Keeler from Avoda Sustainable Acres, Jay Mill, Tony Lopez, Thomas Eliason, Judson Taylor, John Mills, Grown Up Farm, Jacob Arthur, Clara Coleman, Bob and Ann Patton of Hexhamshire Organics, Jared Kirst, Jay Armour, Dan Brisebois, C-Mac Small, Jay McCombs, Tim Baldwin, Marc-Andre Giroux, Esoterra Culinary, Steve Larson, Fiona and Donnie of Firefly Farm, Jean-Martin Fortier, Yannick Laplante, Jim Lawrence, and Peter Brode. Big thanks to everyone who supports our show. Enough from me. Let's get into this amazing conversation with Hayden O'Donnell of Goodie Farm. Hayden O'Donnell, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And glad to have you. So let's kick this off where we always do. Give us the farm breakdown. Where are you? What size acreage are you working on? And those sorts of things.
Well, we're in Cherry Valley, California, which is about, an hour outside of LA towards Palm Springs area. We got about 2 acres right now and recently are upgraded. So we'll be, by spring, hopefully get it around 3-4 acres that's actually seeded, planted, and ready to go. So we're kind of in the middle of a transition right now of growing the farm a little bit, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Can you give us, but maybe first let's talk a little bit about your market. Is LA kind of your primary market? Is that, or are you just kind of local there?
Yeah, it isn't. And I'm glad about that because it's about an hour and a half away with no traffic. So, we're in Riverside, California, and it's growing very quick. And Palm Springs is about 30 minutes away. So we're lucky enough to almost be in a Goldilocks zone where we have restaurants as well as enough people in the community who can, support the farm.
So expand on that a little bit. In terms of how you're selling the food, you said restaurants, like what are all your outlets there?
In the beginning of I tried to at least, not put all my eggs in one basket. So even though I didn't know much in the beginning, I had figured out that, let me try to break it up between the restaurant, CSA, and then at the time we had a farm stand that, you could come to the farm. So that was what I took off with, let me get into these markets. And so the farm stand, that allowed anybody to come up and access what we were growing. And we started the CSA, which, is nice. That creates a real, connection with the community. It also enables us to understand what we're looking at and how much the farm will be able to make. And I had a personal interest. It just felt good and exciting to sell to restaurants. So and that probably took the longest to really solidify. And but we're in about year 4, and we're really starting to gain ground with the restaurants and have great relationships. And for me as a grower, just understand the ebb and flow of, what do the restaurants want? How do you know what they want, and things like that?
Yeah. So we'll give us a little bit more history in terms of, you said year 4, like maybe give us a little bit of your history and then how that led into starting this farm.
Yeah. It's I didn't have any, history in agriculture. I was into music. I was playing music, living in Los Angeles. And I was originally from the town next to Cherry Valley, which is called Banning. So I had moved there when I was, a young man, graduated from high school, moved to the city to chase my music dreams. And at the same time, I had got involved with a company called X Large, which is like clothing and, skateboarding, which is, I'm born in 1976. So, I grew up with that classic California skateboarding culture and art and bike riding and music. So those are my things. And, I got older, and by the time I hit 30, I had met my wife, and that's really what changed my perspective of, once we started a family, I had changed, and I was ready to, figure out what I was going to do with my life. And at the time I was watching the kids, which was amazing. My wife has an off the farm job, and we were living in Burbank. And I started having a desire just to, take the responsibility for my family to, be in control of our own food. It really started creeping on me that, where's this food coming from? How do we know what's going on with it? And, my kids, obviously I had a daughter at the time, a young daughter, and she brought that, like, so, you worry so much about them. And so from there, I just started some little gardening beds in the back of the Burbank house. And that was the initial seed, so to speak, that, almost 4 years later, when we moved out of Burbank and into Cherry Valley, which had started about an acre and a half, a little under that. And, just a natural progression of us moving out of the city to have more room for the family, as well as kind of escape the chaos. And luckily, over time of me coming here to the property, I was able to just, start really simple with, get some chickens and understand that, and chop some wood and just learn about, the seasons. I was really out of step when I was living in the city, about, it's spring, it's summer, it's fall, it's winter, none of those things I had really paid attention to for a long time. So coming out here, I just naturally started noticing the flow of the property we were on and what it takes to just manage that, even without farming. And that built up into, an epiphany of 4 years after we moved to this property. I took stock, and I learned a little bit about the land and the cycle. And, I realized that, we live on a farm. And go back to mention that the house we live in, it's a 110-year-old craftsman. So it's one of the first houses in the area. And, once I was able to understand what I had, that the property was irrigated, that, I could identify, the front here could be a plot, over here could be a plot. And I went into my wife and told her that, hey, change the direction for me. I think I'm going to, try to grow food. And you could stop me. I can really gab. So.
Oh, no, it's great. I'm curious a little bit about that particular property. Like, did you purchase that property? Maybe forgive me if you said that, but did you purchase that property, or is it a lease situation?
Yeah, no, we were lucky we purchased it. And, it was, like I said, we were in Burbank. And prior, I was involved with clothing store Extra Large, and I was running the store. So, and then the store closed down after, this is a while back, 9/11, things just changed, and it lasted about 5 years after that. And that's kind of what set up for me the mental space of, okay, I was around 31. The family started. Like I said, my wife had her career going. I was in a transition. So I filled the shoes of, lack of a better, Mr. Mom for the first 3-4 years. I was, at home cooking, cleaning, which actually, that really set me up for the amount of effort I would have to put out to start the farm,
Mm-hmm.
going through the 3-4 years of, being the point person in the family to manage the kids' days. And this is when they were, both under 5. I mean, it was a crazy, I give it up to all parents. And it was a really, it was a workload. It was really a workload. And as they got into school, like the kindergarten, and then, my time freed up, it had just mentally put me in the position to be able to know that whatever's next, it's going to be easy, comparatively, physically it's very demanding, raising kids. So, that was a perfect setup for me to, absorb the reality once it sets in of the amount of effort it takes, physically to get a farm off of the ground. And the focus from, 6 a.m. till who knows when some days, you really, so, which was cool looking back on perspective. That had really kind of like shaped my mental perspective to be able to focus long days and really enjoy it, actually. But anyways, the farm here, like I said, we came here not to farm at all. It was to, we were in the kids, and like I said, you open the door when you're in the city and you're worried, don't go there, I got to watch you. And I just felt bad. I didn't grow up like that. I grew up with, hey, Mom, Dad, it's 10 in the morning. We'll see you right before the sun goes down, and I kind of, not that you could do that these days, but I wanted to at least give my kids the opportunity to, get a foundation in something other than commerce, so to speak. So that's initially, we got here, like I said, the house is an old house. And, the minute we showed up to see it, we were going to rent it. And we came up here, and like I said, it's not easy to move. So we were a little nervous, found the property. And like I said, I had lived over the town over. So when I was young, I've always been into cycling, and I would ride just long rides. I'm talking 11 years old. And this neighborhood where we live now, I would ride up here. It's kind of in the foothills of the San Gorgonio Mountains, which is one of the largest mountains in California. Not very popular one. There's no snowboarding or tourism there. So we're nestled right at the beginning, going up around 3,600 feet. And it's a beautiful, very small, maybe 6,000 people live in Cherry Valley. But like I said, it's above a town called Beaumont, close to a lot of busy areas. And so we came up here, and 6 months into us renting, the lady we were renting from called us and said, it's essentially too stressful for her to continue the ownership of the house, and would we be interested in purchasing it? And, we weren't really ready, but, luckily my wife is pretty well versed in finances and the accounting world. So, it was a real struggle, but we went for it. Took a long time, and after about 6 months, we bought the property, and it was one of the best things we did looking back now, and sold the house in Burbank and switched our lives to here. But no idea to farm, like I said, just for the family life.
After that, it sort of evolved where you're sitting there and you look at all this property and see a farm blossoming underneath.
Right. And I will add that Cherry Valley and even Beaumont a little bit, it has a history in agriculture. So, you're driving around, you're going about your day, and you're seeing livestock, you're seeing, no farms, but remnants of that. The Cherry Valley used to do, it was originally called Apple Valley. It kind of copied the model of a town called Apple Valley back in the day, where people would come and we call it you pick your own fruit. So Cherry Valley picked up on that and became Cherry Valley. Like I said, we have the temperature, we're a little bit high, we're in the foothills, and for many decades you would come here to pick cherries. I actually did it in 1988. My parents brought me here, and which is ironic, and I believe it's a house a couple houses down from where we are now. So that's kind of what was here, and there's a lot of ghosts of that. So as I was here, that also helped with me seeing just what it looked like, because like I said, I had never farmed before, so moving to Cherry Valley kind of exposed me to, that's what a prairie looks like, and that's what cows grazing look like, and just brought me closer to the beginning of starting the farm, of just understanding there's a lot of real organic things going on, and now I'm seeing it on a daily basis, and I think subconsciously that definitely had an effect of hey, something like this is possible, to transition to a lifestyle like this.
So those first years, like you said, you had some gardening background, but you didn't have some, a lot of farming, agriculture background. What was that like? How did that start for you?
I said, I had done some gardening. I was just getting into it. So there's a publication called Mother Earth News, and my wife had bought me a subscription to that for a year prior. And, it was a light read, but I had read an article in there about microgreens, and there was something about that article that just really, broke through me and made me realize, because what it was is they actually had numbers. It wasn't just, do this. It was, we do X amount, this equals X amount of dollars. And that really sparked you can calibrate, this can be real. You can get to a position to where, when you have a family, the wild days are over. You have to, hopefully get results from your efforts and be able to project what may be coming for you. So, that little article prompted me to, for a couple weeks, just be in the mindset of, maybe this is something I want. And one day it literally just accumulated to that's it. This is what I'm going to do. We have the property. We have all these things. I've been reading books by, Curtis Stone and, John Martin Fortier, and, those guys, they had come into my orbit. And like I said, it was a quick decision. And luckily my wife was into it. That, hey, I don't know what you're saying, but let's, it sounds pretty good. And from then on, I just literally I dove into it. We had a small orchard when we bought the property. It was a ton of citrus trees. So that was probably the first thing I did, was get rid of the trees and, start making a lot of mistakes. I had already knew that I wanted to be no-till, but at that time, what it meant to me was, I'm not going to use a tractor. I do want to sync up with, the cycle, the natural cycle as much as possible. And I think that's something that is always in my life. I'm not somewhat of a purist. If I'm going to play music, then I want it to be really stripped down, and, my ideas are really stripped down. So that was a natural for me to identify that. And also it backed up the feeling of why I moved here, of that, how do I know where this is coming from? How do I know they were great stewards of the land and they actually put in what they said they did? And, that's a very difficult question to answer. How do you know a farm is behaving the way they say they are? And so those things led me to, quickly realize that I do want to behave like that on my farm. And I'll say people like Curtis Stone, he was, this was about 5 years ago. He was a big influence right in the beginning. I felt he gave great information. And, I'm saying him in particular because I was drawn to his videos and his book, and I was able to really understand what he was saying. And, I took that information and a few other books I read, videos, and just, like I said, started making a lot of mistakes with learning how to prep a bed, which, I use perma beds, they're in-ground beds. And so I started doing that. And like I said, I knew nothing. I built some beds because we had a lot of gopher problems. And to me at the time, hey, I'll build the beds and I won't have to deal with the gophers. But, not true at all. And I quickly realized, I was fortunate enough to, and, I'll say this, there's another part of the farm, for me in Cherry Valley, like I said, there are a lot of just people who in front of their property have a box, say oranges, and it's out of, hey, just leave the money, donation. That's not uncommon to see. And, I wanted though to go a step further and actually be there when somebody showed up, not just, oh, here's the fruit, I'll just stick my money in this box, which is cool. But it was really exciting to me to think, imagine if somebody showed up to the farm and there was somebody like, hey, how you doing? I had never seen that. So in the early beginning, I built a small little farm stand, and very romantic. And that looking back, it was really cool. That enabled me to, throughout growing the farm, even from the beginning, to offer what I was successful with and really start meeting the community. And it took about 1.5 years, 2 years for that little farm stand to, get rolling. But that was kind of the catalyst too for Goodie Farm, myself and my wife, to make relationships with people that would, really support us and create opportunities for the farm.
There's so many things in there that I want to talk about. Maybe we can get some nuts and bolts on the farm stand, because it has evolved from a farm stand to a farm store now. Do I have that right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's been about 2 years. And like I said, it's been, it's interesting because I think because we are located in it, kind of a Goldilocks area where we have enough residential houses and we have enough just of a population around us that wants this, organic vegetables. So, we were lucky. It's taken a little longer, but we're able to, looking back, realize the farm stand was quickly getting pretty busy. And this little shop we have now came up, and it was so close to where we lived. And we started realizing that, even though we're not ready, we're not going to find a better spot. So just out of faith, we acquired it and slowly started, selling, doing what we're doing at the farm stand over at this more solidified farm shop. And one of the other main reasons was, as the farm grew, it's very difficult to keep your stuff looking fresh in a 100-day California summer day. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So that was a big challenge of, I do a lot of lettuce. So how it became difficult to keep the lettuce looking real fresh without refrigeration and things like that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And, my wife started, handles the CSA. So that was one of the big changes too. Once, I would say starting this, not this year, but the year prior, right before COVID started, that was probably year 3 for us. And that was the first time coming out of winter that I knew enough and we were going to get a decent harvest. Like I said, made a ton of mistakes and harvests were always spotty and, I call it rubber banding. The farm was always in the position where we have it, we don't have it. We have it, we don't have it. So I was able to kind of get everything ready coming into the 3rd year. And, COVID came. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I've worked so hard, and friends and family and everybody's been so supportive. And I have all this stuff in the ground, the most stuff I've ever had, and everything looks amazing. And what's going to happen? And, every day I'm very, very thankful. But what happened was the demand just increased exponentially at that point for us. And like I said, we're one of the only people behaving like this in this area, where we're a small family-run farm, making our stuff available to the public through a store. Now, there's not a lot of that going on. And that was another exciting thing for us. So my wife, much more organized than I am, started our first CSA, and that really solidified the farm shop. And from that, the CSA, which is bringing people in, and we started, contacting other artisan people, literally mothers and daughters who create soap companies, and other farms who are creating either packaged goods and are farming in what, ways we can relate to. So we combine that with the vegetables and the CSA, and that really seemed to be a good model for the store. Do you have any advice or tips on that sort of thing, like working with other people when it comes to managing your farm store? Because this is something that kind of strikes home for me, because my wife and I are getting ready to, start a farm store in the next year or so. And we probably will be bringing in stuff from other people. Like, is there anything you've learned in doing that, or anything that you've realized, like, in terms of managing that, or, any thoughts you have on it in general? Yeah, like I said, what you already know this, if you're a farmer, you're going to need more than you imagine, and I think everybody realizes that a couple years into where you're like, whoa, we need more space. So I think that's obviously a fundamental thing, that if you're trying to stock a shop, you're going to have the produce to stock it with. So understanding that, but like I said, like we did, you can grow into that. And then, what we've started realizing is, I have a retail background, and we were selling like baskets because we were doing, like farmers markets or like a festival. So, and we kind of stopped doing the farmers markets and the festivals because now we have this place. So at the time it was kind of like vegetables, produce from the farm mixed with, almost like home goods, a basket, or like I said, soap and things, that could go along with that, how they were produced. But over time, we are definitely going towards the more just of, a small market that actually serves the public. So almost like a baby tiny grocery store. And now the products we're bringing in are less about like a basket or something for a countertop, and more items that supplement our vegetables, our produce. So, we're selling peppers and salsa and, things you can eat. So I think that's what it's changed. We've moved from, less of a retail to come, maybe buy like something that doesn't have anything to do with food to, now the other products we're bringing in are things that can complement, maybe when you're cooking, hey, another like Los Poblanos has done well for us, selling their salts and things like that, spices. So it's kind of like things that can go, somebody can show up, I got the fresh vegetables, I have the best, spices, and now I can go home and make myself a meal and, you know what I mean, really put it all together.
And is somebody there taking care of the shop at full time? Is that like a...
No, we do our, weekly CSA pickups, and, nothing's perfect. There's still some rubber banding, so to speak, going on in the farm where, especially this year, it's so hot. So when the farm is doing really well and we have a lot, then we'll open like 3 days a week right now, because it's just me, my wife, and she still has an off-farm job. I have friends who help me and a guy who helps me out. So, the farm shop's getting more of our attention now as the farm gets more developed. But we're not open 5 days a week. Our Saturday and a Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. If the farm's doing really well, if the farm is kind of in a thin period of the season, then we try to at least open on Saturdays during our CSA pickup. And that seems, that's the best we could do right now with where the farm is at. Like I said, we recently, 4 months ago, through FarmLink, which is a farm company by the USDA that helps farmers get loans and grants and to acquire land and grow the farm. We were able to partner with them and get another 4.5 acres. So I've developed a little bit of that, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. I have, where our house is, where we live. I've been working on about an acre here since the beginning. So, here it's like the Garden of Eden. I go outside, and the whole cycle has finally been established. There's the right insects. No longer are my crops being attacked so much. I'm seeing snakes, gophers, raptors. There's tons of pollinators, and my, like I said, I consider myself organic. We are USDA organic, and I behave in that way of the no-till organic, permaculture of taking care of the soil, and that takes a while. So I'm really excited this year because I feel like, it's been justified. All that hard work, all the behavior of doing the right thing for the land, putting the right amendments in, taking that seriously. I for the first time, it's really apparent that, hey, this actually works. This is it. This is what I was working for, to get into this cycle of, the land being healthy and, responsive. And, now I know enough now to like I said, I identify that, that's a positive or that's a negative. And, I'm seeing a lot of positives around, and, that's exciting.
Yeah. Is the CSA going year round?
We do, because, we live in Southern California and it's sunny pretty much all the time, which is, there's benefits to that and negatives to that. But we're going to do one more for the fall coming up here in a couple weeks. And then we'll see where we're at from there, because we can grow through, we have some tunnels, not heated or anything like that, but it gets to more, the crop selection really shrinks, and it's a lot of cut lettuce, headed lettuce, radishes. And so not sure if that's, people want to see us say that, hey, you got 5 bags of lettuces and a bunch of radish,
Yeah.
But that's where the shop comes in, because you know what? People still, they might not want the 5 bags, but they want 3 bags, 2 bags, and the radishes and some salt. And, so you're able to, and that's what I like about, having a shop, and is because you're in control of that. The farm owns that. And so you can react, if you have too much, or you can kind of, help yourself out by dictating, when and how you'll be able to get rid of your product. And that's pretty amazing, because sometimes it doesn't always sync up. Sometimes you did too much of something, and, it's like, man, do you really want to compost all of that? So if you're just have a restaurant or a farmer's market, and maybe things don't do that well for you for a specific week, you're kind of in a bind. But, if we find ourselves sitting on stuff, then we'll push through and open more days, give people more opportunity. And that usually works out for us.
Hey, you all, just jumping in here real quick to get a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are designed and built in Italy, where small-scale farming has been a way of life for generations. Discover the beauty of BCS on your farm with PTO-driven implements for soil working, shredding cover crop, spreading compost, mowing under fences, clearing snow, and more, all powered by a single gear-driven machine that's tailored to the size and scale of your operation. To learn more, view sale pricing, or locate your nearest dealer, visit bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmers Web. Farmers Web software gives you the tools you need to manage your entire sales process. Built specifically for farmers' needs, Farmers Web helps you to save time, reduce errors, increase efficiency, and provides flexibility for working seamlessly with your whole customer base. Visit farmersweb.com to schedule a demo, try their free account or a 1-month free trial of their paid accounts, and don't forget to check out their free how-to guides on selling online to individual buyers, as well as how to work with such buyers as restaurants, schools, and stores at www.farmersweb.com. All right, back to the show. With the expanded acreage, are you going to be doing a lot of the same crops? Are you kind of diversifying the crops a little bit more? Like, what's the sort of crop plan with that?
Yeah, I definitely, like I said, I want to stop the rubber banding, and, that's something you learn that, if every single row is seeded, well, you're in trouble, because, now you need to succession plan, because, that's one thing I learned. I used to think, oh yeah, I'm success, everything's seeded. And then, 2 months later, you got nothing, so that's going to be a big part of it, because as you grow, I need to have plots that are covered and waiting to be seeded, and ones that are in production. So that's one of the biggest things that will be implemented. But definitely new, with new space, I can start getting into more specialized varieties. Like this season we did Perilla, which is like a Korean leaf. And
did you get that from Kristen Leach? She does that. She does a really amazing Perilla.
We did, yeah. That is exactly who we got it from. And interesting, you get in she sits on the board that for the Farm Link, which was, you start talking, getting into the world, and you realize, oh man, it's a pretty small world. And her and my wife is Korean, and she's more of the point person with the all the communication with the outside world from the farm. So her and Kristen definitely talk to each other, and my wife loves her. We really appreciate it. She sent us some seeds. And so definitely want to go down that road, and I was a little timid in the past, because when you're first starting off, you want to touch all the bases, and then sometimes, the classic thing happens where some people are requesting, oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? So you start chasing everything down, and, hey, that one person isn't going to cover the whole row you just seeded of that particular, variety they wanted. So that's something I stopped. You got to learn, it's easy to chase down varieties. Like, I got to do this, I got to do that. So I kind of put a stop to that this past year, to where it's like, let me do what I know I can do, the varieties where I'm familiar with their behavior. But like I said, coming into this season, like I said, we are now ready to grow some new varieties on the land and get a little more eccentric with that, which I'm excited about, because that's one thing I like. Each plant, species, variety, they really have their own personality, and it's interesting once you get to know it. You can start understanding how it's going to behave, and that gets pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's funny. I still want to grow all sorts of different stuff, even though I know it's not always a good idea.
Yeah, totally.
This year we grew popcorn, and it's been my favorite thing, because it's a snack that we grew that the kids played in, while it was growing, and then we harvested it, and they are able to pop it with me, and then we eat it and, hang out together. Like, it's just this perfect crop in that way, but it actually makes better money than most corns, but it's not a profitable crop at all. But trying to find the balance between having enough space and still having the crops that make you enough money without taking away from those crops, like that balance there, I think is always really challenging.
Yeah, that's pretty much one of the hardest things to achieve, is that right there, because I definitely wrestle with that. And the smaller you are, the more difficult that situation is going to be to handle.
Yeah, because
things get, like you said, you have to have empty space on your farm in order to have a fluid season. And, it's things like that that sounds really simple, but, you really don't realize that till you're really, you've really committed to growing. That's something that's not revealed to you a lot of times when you're thinking about it, that, oh, well, you're going to have empty space. Whoever thinks about empty space on a farm? Nobody. But that's pretty crucial, to have rows that are waiting and have time to develop. And, especially with, a new plot. That's one thing that I was talking about at the plot at the house where we've been growing. It's pretty, I see a lot of the effects of the no-till gardening, farming style, production style. And in this new land, it almost took me back to when I first started. And I'm glad that I've gone through the cycle, because I would almost give up, now, because I've developed, we've had about 4 months, so I haven't had a lot of time. This fall and winter, I'll be able to really get it going. But, I'm reminding, everything's going wrong. The gophers are eating it. The birds are all over it. Every mite is killing it. The tomato worms are, and, I'm glad I understand that, that's how it is. You're in the beginning of this new plot, and there's going to be a lot of struggles there. But I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
I'm a little more well-versed this time around in how to fix those things as well. That's one thing I feel about growing and farming is, once the season starts, it's difficult to fix a problem. So, you're going to have to wait till the next year. Once you identify, like, oh, I could have, well, it's too late. So next year, make sure you get that right,
Can you talk a little? It's funny because I actually, we just moved to a new property, and it's a very different property. Like, it's 15 minutes from my other property, but it may as well be in the other side of the world. Like, it's a totally different. The soil is more clay heavy. It doesn't drain at all. It's just like a totally different monster. So it's been, a lot of challenge, a lot of that same thing where you're like, I kind of went into it being like, I know what I'm doing. I just wrote a book. I feel really good about this. And then all sorts of things happen that I've never experienced. And I was like, oh, I only know like what I know, and these new things I have to learn.
Right.
And which is great, has been great. Like, I have so much more perspective, especially on clay. But can you talk a little bit about what you did to open up that new property? Like, what was that? What did what was the approach there? And was there anything now looking at it that you would do differently?
It's still pretty fresh, but one thing I did right off the bat was I sent away for a soil test sample, and that was something that really helped because, once you get a good read back of what's going on, and a credible one, you can get soil samples from your local nursery or whatever, but, I would say spend, a couple $100 to send it off to a lab so you get a real understanding of what's going on. And that was step one. And what came back was great. I have no heavy metals, none of that stuff is going on there, but I am really low in organic matter. The plot had sat there, the people we purchased from had it for 11 years, great older couple, and they had put in an orchard, but it's pretty bare and dry. So that was, like you said, your book reminded me of that's step one. Get your soil to the best it can be. And for me, that approach, the practical approach of that is, adding compost to, beefing up the organic matter, adding the, nutrients, microbes, and all those things. And, I did what led me to the success on the first plot, which is, isn't much. I don't use that many variables to treat the soil. And like go back to your book, keep it covered, which is the first time here at the first plot, I had never covered anything. And, you mentioned that it's better if there's, keep the soil and the rows planted as much as you can. So since, I've been starting the farm, I never really had to deal with that because I was dealing with about an acre, a little bit more. And, it was always planted. It's always planted. So that's one of the first things I did. Soil test, read the soil test out, get the right amendments to correct what's going on. Even though I understand, put the compost on, put those amendments on, don't expect a miracle. This is going to take a while, but you got to start somewhere. And like I said, I started implementing, cover crops, not cover crops, but tarping. So that's kind of my new thing is tarping. And I like it. It makes total sense to me to do that. And so that's too with the land. I'm now able to do things, I have to manage the size and things that I didn't have to learn to do here. So getting into more succession, tarping, and soil management. And we're also working with the NRCS, which for our farm had a big impact, So we met with the biologists and archaeologists. They bring them out. And recently, we're starting to, we just got approved to get some row hedges and some elderberries that line like 500 feet of the front. Compost and mulch. So those were the first steps: testing the soil, adding the amendments, and then starting to create a conservation plan for the land with the NRCS. And so far, those are good. Everything seems to work out. Like I said, this fall and winter, I'll be focused on developing that new property. And, side note, I have chickens and goats and a couple alpacas that we've acquired over the last 2 years. So starting to implement, the animal impact on the farm, because that's part of the cycle I felt like I was kind of missing. So creating compost, my own compost now, and just having plots that will be developed in a year or two from now, get the benefit of the animals, living on that.
Yeah, that's great. It's animals this past year for ourselves. We kind of backed off a little bit more than we had in the past because we moved to a new property and knew it would be a big endeavor anyway, and we didn't want to just be running ourselves then. But I love, like, one thing that I'm always looking at is new ways to do things like do at least a small percentage of our own compost, a greater percentage of our own compost. We already do a small percentage, but there's only so much you can do by hand. But animals are really, beneficial for that because they the manure, you can do deep litters with the chickens. What is that? What's your sort of plan for that, or what are your ideas for how to utilize them?
Same as what you said, once again, you need a lot of material to supply compost for your farm, so that's next to impossible to achieve with only throwing, adding your stuff you pull out of your road. So that's one part is to, like you said, we do some composting, but to get that as much as we can, generate the compost as well as this new land, like I said, is 4.5 acres. So, right now I'm going to be working on half of that. So, setting up 2.5 acres, that takes a while.
Yeah.
So right now on the other end, that's where, I'm realizing, the animals, they're like workers. So you got the goats and the alpacas, and that will help with keeping, like I said, enriching the soil on the other plot, which, 2-3 years, if we grow that big, we can start setting up, plots on the other 2.5 acres of the property we just got. And I just feel like I said, the animals help manage the growth, of that empty space and put back into the soil, and also help with just creating that, the full, like I said, the full cycle of having all the right parts on the land to promote, that real organic cycle of you're not the only thing out there doing the work, that together it's all happening because of every single thing that's going on, from the animals to the bugs to the earthworms to the things you can't even see with your eye that are down there creating holes and transferring energy. And I mean, it gets pretty wild. So, but you're right. I would caution farmers beginning to hold up on animals because they are an incredible amount of work.
Yeah, they are. And we managed sheep for years. Our new property doesn't quite have enough room for them, but we probably will bring in other animals here in the next, 18 months or so. But the beyond chickens. But is there a product with the goats you mentioned? Is it a milk?
No, goats were a response to us acquiring this property and thinking, well, it'd be, obviously people use animals to graze and keep down the weeds and so to speak. So, it was that we, like I said, I don't really have the time to get into goat milk and all of those things, but I do want to, and not just because, for Goodie Farm, but some of these things are interest for, I want to drink goat milk and I want my family to taste that, so right now the animals are more of a personal, like, I want that, the alpacas, they're beautiful. They're relaxing to engage with, and like I said, contribute to the grazing and the replenishing of like an empty plot that we would have them on. But no plans to create any products with animals. Every now and then we'll get rid of our, my chickens are growing. That's been interesting. It started with, hey, that's just for us. But now that we have the shop, I mean, whenever we take extra eggs we have, people really, they sell out instantly. So over the last couple of months, this last year, I've been letting the hens go Brody and expanding our flock, which I've grown to really like. Watching a new set of chickens come onto the farm, and so that's cool. And even with that though, that's still kind of something that I just like, but it makes sense for the farm. It's not really, we're not looking to really profit off that or have that be a big part of the farm,
Yeah. Yeah. There's always something nice about having animals around, just in general.
Yeah. For my kids too. I'll say this, when everybody got locked down, man, like my daughter's now 12 and my son is 10. They really like leaned on these animals, and it was a real natural thing. So, and now they're back in school, and I've watched it kind of wane away. It's a little sad, but really grateful that we had the chickens. I mean, they really hung out with these animals, and that goes back to the beginning of the decision of being on a property, and that was an affirmation. Like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to happen was, have the space for my kids to, hey, make friends with animals, on a real level. And I watched that happen. And now that time has passed and we're moving back to, everybody moving around freely, they're no longer leaning on the animals as much. But I was grateful that was there for them.
Yeah, that's great. And I think also just thinking about animals in addition to a farm, I think a lot of times people think I want to do it all and I need to do it all at once. And I think that once you have your product or the thing that you're really focusing on, in our case, it's vegetables.
Yes.
You really have to get those systems established and functioning before you can reach out and do too much more with a bunch of other stuff. Or at least that's been my experience. Like I generally discourage people from going too far, but having a few animals for like chickens are the greatest because they're kid friendly and kids can manage them. It's a great, my 6-year-old has done a lot with like managing his chickens, and when he doesn't, it's part of like his chores. So like that's a thing that is you can start adding those animals in slowly that way. And they're great to have on the farm. Something I wanted to touch on, I was thinking about, you mentioned earlier about having, slowly opening up that 2.5 acres or 2 acres, and it's going to take some time. That's another thing I think about, is that it takes, in an ideal scenario, you open up land enough to get started, and then anything you're increasing into, you do it kind of slowly. And that's because the more intentional and slower you kind of break into a property, I find that the better it does in those first seasons.
Yeah, I think that's true. And like I said, you also have I'd say this about farming, I didn't understand, you're really tethered to the farm. There's no just like, hey, I'll be back. And, so as, you acquire, I noticed this, I have already an acre or so really doing well and healthy and in good production. And, there's all that. So once you acquire this new space, a new property, what's different is when you were doing, in the beginning, it was just, you're just focusing on those first plots. But now you step away and you've got, more land to manage, but you still have to tend to those other plots. Mm. So you just don't have as much time to break away from what you've already established to create something new. And, you got to, and what I've learned is, and this is another thing that I think, the light isn't shine on too bright for people looking into farming and getting into this is, what is crucial too is understanding, and this depends on what region you are, how the weather cycle is, when do you seed? When does this happen? And once you start understanding that, then you can start forecasting that, okay, I have all this seeded, it'll come to harvest at this point. So then you kind of get pockets of a couple weeks where you can focus on something other than the field and post-harvest,
Yeah.
And throw it in, this year we established a packing shed and, a salad spinner and a bubbler and, those are the other things you're doing as you're growing. You don't have those on day one. And, one thing about farming, small farming is, more than ever now, yes, there are products out there to buy, but, usually it comes from ingenuity. And, that's one thing, like I said, I think I feel grateful for the timing of my introduction to this kind of life, because I was able to look at a video, and somebody, in particular, my bubbler is the gentleman who runs Steadfast Farm.
Eric,
did a video. Yeah, and, that right there, I mean, it's pretty crazy that you can, they're giving that out, like, because you don't know what a bubbler is, that comes later on where you're like, oh my gosh, I need a bubbler and I need this and I need this. And it's just those kind of obstacles, the technology we have and people sharing the information and, taking their time because, it's a lot of work to create content. And that's a whole nother side of a modern farm too, that you have to create content. And, I like it, not easy to do, but very appreciative that the content is there. And, those things specifically have helped me, get over some of the biggest hurdles for a small farm, like say having a functioning packing shed. I have that now. And, with the bubbler and the spinner and the drawing screens, and those are all taken, from information people are releasing through media. And I would suggest people take advantage of that.
Yeah, because it wasn't there 10 like we were talking before we started recording that 10 or 15 years ago, it wasn't. Yeah.
I mean, man, even the last 5 years, it has really, there's a lot of information out there now, there's a lot of information out there. And I that's one thing I like too, I do like people, and I do like showing people. And so it does seem like, a natural progression as these smaller farmers progress, then they're interacting through their CSA or through farmers markets. And what I've realized is that the public does want to know, or somebody who's thinking about farming, there is no avenue to learn, there's no college course of small farming and here's how it works. So I see, Crickmore and Green Acres and these farms getting into the education spectrum. And that makes sense to me. That gets me excited. As we're at the shop, people ask, like, well, what do you put into your rows? What do you mean it's a permabed? I find myself explaining a lot of things, which is awesome. I like doing that. But, that's something, too, with the new land that we are definitely interested in, which is, doing workshops and showing people just the fundamentals, because I have a ton to learn. But, hey, the little secrets the lands have revealed, I'm willing to share. And, we get a lot of requests of, can we come to the farm? Can we see the farm? Do you do farm tours? We're getting to that point where we're getting that kind of questions asked from schools. And, hey, is there anything, how can we interact with you guys? And right now we don't have a lot of avenues for interaction through education. So, that is something that I would like to get into.
I think that's great.
Inviting people onto the farm and showing them, hey, here's how you flip a bed, and you could do this at any scale, or here's how you do starters. Here's how it's all basic stuff, but you take for granted that you've learned all these things. It becomes normal. Like, well, what do you mean you don't know how to hard prune tomatoes? Well, yeah, nobody really does.
Right.
So.
Do you think, I'm curious, this question's kind of always bouncing around in my head is like, what are the, underexplored topics in market gardening that you think that we need more information out there about them?
And I think one of it is, like I said, it's easy to explain the fundamentals of, hey, apply this to the soil and, it's pretty, you're lacking organic matter, so you're going to need to add compost and, other microbial beneficial supplements. And, that's really cut and dry to me. But like I said, what isn't cut and dry is helping somebody, like I said, understand the rhythm. And this year, like a good example is previous years, it almost seemed like, there's no way for me to be ready to have a fall crop I need to be seeding in August, you got to start seeding then. And, in August, it's 100 degrees for the whole month.
Yeah.
And it was just really hard for me to understand that. And then once you execute that, to understand little things like, okay, when it's really hot, space them out a little more, which will give you a better airflow and less, pressure from bad bugs, as well as you're also going to have add some kind of fabric covering over it, shade cloth, both. You might need insect and shade cloth, and things like that. Like how do you? Because to me, farming is very responsive to where, and that's what you start getting good at. You're almost like a fortune teller, where you start knowing what's going to happen, and the more that you can guess of the future and be right, the better grower you're going to be. And I think that right there, that teaching people how to understand what they're looking at, like, a season's about to change, and the timing, and, also the belief in, if you execute the seeding and the watering and the cultivation of the land, then have the belief that the sun and the water and the wind and the bugs, they will do their part. You're not in control of that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of it, is, because that takes a while to understand a planting cycle and to really execute that. And, I feel like if people understood a better time frame, and they're out there, you can Google a seeding chart, and you see the little color blocks, and when it tells you to do this and do that. Well, like I said, there's a lot more going on than that. And if you knew about, hey, you can actually use, agrofabric on top of shade cloth, get a better drip system going, increase your water. These are all things that, take a while to figure out. And, nobody really talked about. A lot of the discussion is, here's how you manage soil. Here's how, you do this. And, the other part too, that's very scary when you're starting a farm is, figuring out your pricing. And I get it that, these are dictated from, region to region, depending on where you're at but that was probably one of the most painful things for me in the experience of, well, who am I and how much do I charge for any of this? You know what I mean? And that's scary for multiple things. You don't want to undercharge and you don't want to overcharge. And, not sure how you figure out, hey, what am I worth? And what is my time worth? Faster than to one day when you're just fed up and you're like, this ain't working. You know what I mean? Like, I'm working way too hard for $5. You know what I mean? And there's also the touchy thing that, you feel guilty. Personally, that took me a while to overcome too. That, it's a very strange thing that you're out there so connected with, nature, but then you have to come all the way back to turning that into commerce. It's not just the field moments, that what you're doing out there is going to come all the way back to a point of sale. And, understanding that, calibrating what you're worth, and feeling good at the moment of point of sale is, that's something that there's not a lot of information about.
Yeah.
I've always wondered that, like, how could there be, there is no website to see where, like, hey, here's the standard price today. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I think it's good also for young farmers to just hear that everybody kind of goes through that, like everybody is like, oh, what the heck do I charge? And sometimes, I mean, it's not entirely arbitrary, but you're just kind of having to make up a number at some point where you're like, okay, I know this is roughly how much
right,
labor I've put into it. This is how, like, the amendments that cost. This is, how long it took to harvest, storage, and curing anything that has to happen to it. So this is roughly what it cost me. Now put a price on it. Like that, there's that moment for every crop, for every farmer to some extent. And you get better at that and you kind of figure it out and you figure out your market. But
yeah, you do. And, you know, it feels really good when you pass that hurdle and you're in rhythm with your restaurants and your farm shop and your CSA. You know, I say that's, you know, that's a really big step if you're a farmer, and to get past that, solidify all that, and, you know, feel good about it. And I think, you know, like I said, there's always movement, you know, so, but I feel pretty good where we're at. I feel like, you know, I'm getting what I need and I'm able to offer our customers the best product at a really good price.
And are you all able to track your profitability really well? Like one of the things that I always find is tracking profitability efficiently and like sticking with it. That I'm like, do you feel like that's something you're doing a good job with?
Yeah, we've gotten better. And I'll say this, you know, and this is where I go back to, you know, feel like lessons that really resonated with me. And I remember reading, you know, from some of the authors I'd mentioned, Curtis Stone, those guys, that, you know, the first couple of years, don't stress out too much on trying to track every little thing and crunch. And the reality is you're just too busy. And unless you know, have an understanding of farming, there's just too much for you to grasp those first couple of years, to when you first put the first shovel down or start creating a row and laying drip. I mean, your days are smashed. And so it was almost, that worked out for us because, like I said, we're about last year, and as the farm grew, I'll say this, my wife, she got more involved. And, you know, that's where I'm, as a grower and, you know, the founder of the farm, very fortunate, because my wife is versed in financing and accounting. And I would say if it was up to me, I would probably fail in that area. Not fail, but it would be a little more rickety. And she's helped me she's helped me create spreadsheets and invoicing. And so I'd say that I have a little bit of an advantage from probably the average person, that, you know, my wife has an understanding of how to do that. And, you know, I'm still learning, but through her creating, like I said, invoices, and I'd say this going through the organic process, you know, forced me as the grower to, you know, if you're doing it right, you're tracking your harvesting, you're tracking how much did you sell, you know. So we've gotten better. We're not perfect, but like I said, that's something where I think I was lucky to have a teacher built in to my beautiful, you know, from my beautiful wife. I was able to say, oh my gosh, honey, how do I go into WordPress or not, you know, QuickBooks? And, you know, she was able to, you know, hold my hand through that whole process. And that's just, you know, and I guess the lesson out of that is, you know, use your resources, you know, because that would help, you know, if you know you're weak somewhere. And I knew I was weak in that area. So, you know, it was easy for me to ask for help because I knew I needed it. And I would say that because that's one of the other parts of farming that is really hard to articulate, even through a book or, you know, it really is hard to explain to somebody that, because you would have to have an understanding too of the other side, which is the accounting and the invoicing. And, you know, if you're not really familiar with that, it's hard to put those two together.
Yeah, it really is.
And the sooner you do it, you know, honestly, that my wife coming on, you know, me learning about the land and all those things, like I said, that doesn't equal a point of sale and tracking all these things to understand that, is this even a viable route to continue going down? So I would say that, you know, address that as with as much enthusiasm as you're addressing, learning about the soil and doing all the field work, because those two have to be fused at some point.
Right. And you have to kind of make a routine out of it and figure out how to, do a little bit of that sort of stuff every day.
Absolutely. Or you just fall way behind.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it gets daunting and you don't want to do it.
Right. And then you find yourself at the end of the year wondering, was it good? Was it bad? I have no idea.
Right.
And that's not the best place to be.
No.
I would say this. I started, I didn't really start till my late 30s. It'd have been nice to start when you're a teenager and you could be a little wilder. I always tell the younger people I know, like, man, this is a good time to get into farming right now, where you got time to make a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah. Well, Hayden O'Donnell, thank you so much for this conversation. This has been an absolute blast.
Well, I'll say this. I appreciate it. I've been very shy. I've never spoken about the farm before. So this is the first official farm talk I've ever had. And I was really excited about it.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to facilitate that. All right, if you enjoyed that episode, make sure to follow Goodie Farm on Instagram and all the places. We will hook it up with links in the show notes. Huge thanks to our patrons and show sponsors. This episode was partially supported by a grant through Southern SARE. Make sure to check out no-tillgrowers.com for all of the stuff we do and to learn more about how to support our work. We've got even more stuff in the works, so be on the lookout. And of course, the Living Soil Handbook is now available, so make sure to snag one of those. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you are getting it and leave a review. But this week, all reviews must redefine the way we look at space travel. It's a tall order, but I believe in you. Huge thanks as always to Jackson Roulette and Josh Satin. Thanks to Willie Breeding for the theme music. Biggest thank you imaginable to my wife Hannah for all of her help behind the scenes. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.